Hello. Welcome to another Extra Mile here on the Dashboard Jesus podcast. And as I teased in the podcast this week, I'm really excited about this Extra Mile because it involves one of you. It involves a question that one of you sent me, and you just sent it, the individual that sent this in our paid subscriber community, sent this just kind of picking my brain about something, and I thought, you know what, this is something I would want to share with everybody, because it's one of those things that I really get into, and I'm sorry if you don't, but I think you will. Like, it's easy when you throw out at people favorite presidents. Here's what you're almost guaranteed to get. You're almost guaranteed to get one or two more modern presidents that the person lived through their presidency. Now, obviously, the older the person that you ask, then the more that potential pool expands. But for instance, if I ask my students in high school, even the ones who are actually engaged in the political universe and are aware and, you know, like the college level classes, the higher level classes that I teach. Not that the others don't have the brain power for it. They just usually don't have a passion or an interest in those topics. But if I were to ask them, I guarantee you they would say there would be a Barack Obama or a Donald Trump. Guaranteed that in their top five they would have that. It's just, we call it recency bias. It's why I don't trust any scholarly listing of the best presidents if that list includes anybody from, say, the last 30 to 50 years. Really, if there's anybody post-Reagan, I can't. Maybe George H.W. Bush, but he doesn't normally make people's list of great presidents. But anything after that, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, any of that. And I'm talking about whether this is the best presidents or the worst presidents. Because if you gave people, and I'm not just talking high school students, I'm talking any adult, give me your top five presidents, I think you would have a modern president that they lived through their presidency in their favorites, and a modern president that they lived through in their least favorites or worst presidents. That's the name of the game when it comes to presidential rankings. It's why, like I said, if you ever ask me, I'm not going to include recent presidents. I just don't think enough time has passed for us to actually understand their impact. I just don't. Now, if it's just a fun thing, like who are your favorite presidents, whatever, it doesn't matter. But if you're actually trying to compile a list of the greatest presidents. But the one that came in to me was, who do you think was our most underrated president? Now, I really, really like that. Because one of the things that really frosts me, it even frosts my rhubarb, one of the things that really bothers me is how everybody, because it's what they see from the scholars and they hear the most about these people, if you were the president during a war, you're almost always on people's lists, especially after they get through the ones that maybe they know about. Maybe there's some people that know about our founding era. And so they're going to list Jefferson, they're going to list Washington. Everybody knows about Lincoln, but there again, there's a war. But think of the other presidents that typically are catapulted towards the top. FDR, World War II, was the president during World War II. Sometimes you'll get in there Dwight Eisenhower. Now, he was a president during the Korean conflict, the end of the Korean conflict, but Eisenhower was a general in World War II. So those are the presidents that immediately come to people's minds. So what about underrated presidents? There are a number of them that I would put on the list. John Adams is perpetually underrated. Why? Because he followed George Washington, always in his footsteps. And one of my favorite things about John Adams is he was kind of cranky. I shouldn't say kind of. He was cranky. He had a sour personality, and I just think he's hilarious. And I bet watching him, he wasn't intentionally hilarious. I bet watching him, little pop belly and he's kind of short and always in a bad mood, but I think he would have been a funny dude to kind of watch operate, but certainly an underrated president. So he would go on that list. I'll tell you one that I almost picked as the most underrated president. I almost picked William McKinley. I think how about this? How about this? I think the assassination of William McKinley, some of you didn't even know William McKinley was assassinated. How dare you? But I truly think that the assassination of William McKinley had the most profound effect on America of any presidential assassination. Now, I'm hedging because the Lincoln assassination, how Lincoln would have handled Reconstruction, who knows what the country would have looked like. It would have been much different. So maybe that one, I still think McKinley. I still would argue McKinley. Garfield got assassinated. Kennedy got assassinated. And tragic events, obviously. I'm not blowing them off. But William McKinley was taking the country in one direction. Pro-business. He was a pro-economic growth. All of that stuff. And then when he is shot and killed, the guy that takes his place wasn't really a Republican, but he had joined the Republican Party because they were winning elections and he wanted to win. And all of the Republican Party bosses were really worried about this guy because he was a nut, a little crazy, and certainly not a core conservative-minded individual. He was a progressive. So what do we do with him? Well, let's bury him in the vice presidency. Nobody ever thought, even McKinley thought, nobody's going to shoot me. Nobody's going to get rid of me. People were used to presidential assassinations at that point. Lincoln had been shot. Then 20 years later, you got Garfield that's shot. And now about 20 years later, you're going to have McKinley. But McKinley was immensely popular, so nobody would have anticipated. But it's an anarchist. He's a revolutionary. Czolgosz shoots him, and that bullet that turns the presidency over from a conservative-minded, pro-business, pro-growth William McKinley to a progressive, big government Teddy Roosevelt dramatically changes. I mean, the birth of the progressive movement with Teddy Roosevelt. So, big moment there. McKinley almost made it. But here's who I think is the most underrated. James K. Polk almost made it as well. He would definitely be in it. Grover Cleveland. These are presidents that I would say were vastly underrated. So you can look those up if you care. But here's my pick. My pick is Calvin Coolidge. We have never experienced the kind of robust economic growth, and I know we're used to economic growth, but it's always been shrouded by sometimes, what's the word we should be looking for here? Accounting gimmicks and things like that, and the growth is really more on paper than what is this. This was obscene wealth. Our economy just exploded white hot with the pro-growth policies of Calvin Coolidge. Now, the problem was, during Coolidge's years, because this was unprecedented prosperity, nobody knew how to handle it, including bankers and including people giving out loans and credit and all of that. And so things would eventually, when the market retracts, as it always does, things would spiral out of control because of bad decisions that were being made. Not administrative bad decisions. Basically, Calvin Coolidge got out of the way. But he would be my pick for the most underrated president. And the other part of the question was, what is the greatest thing that individual ever said? One of the reasons I love Calvin Coolidge is because he didn't say much. Now, when he would give a speech, it was usually worth listening to because he wasn't always talking. Polar opposite of recent presidents. And that isn't, I'm not taking a shot at Trump. I'm not taking a shot at Obama. They like to hear themselves talk. Not the case with Calvin Coolidge. But one of my favorite anecdotes is the one where he sits down next to a young reporter at a table at like a banquet or an event. And she says, I made a bet that I could get you to say more than 2 words tonight. And Coolidge looks at her. He was doing something. He puts it down. He turns and looks at her. smirks and says, "You lose." And then went back to what he was doing. Awesome. But anyway, best thing Calvin Coolidge ever said. You ready for this quote? I pulled it up here. I'm going to read it to you. This is so good. And one of the reasons it's so good is because it sticks a bullet, no, an arrow, sticks an arrow right through the heart of Teddy Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson progressivism, and modern progressivism that believes that mankind is always in a state of progress. That is such a process philosophy, all of it is such deception that sometimes our movement and our advances, look at social media. Are there good things about social media? Sure. But one of the things when you make quick advances is you later learn some of this wasn't so good. Here's the Calvin Coolidge quote. "If all men are created equal, that is final." You get what it means? There's nothing else to say about that. All men are created equal. And men in the generic sense, talking about women. All men are created equal. That's final. If that's true, there's no changing that. There's no altering it. There's no improving it. All men are created equal. If they are endowed with inalienable rights, can't be taken away, and we know what they are: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or property. If they are endowed with inalienable rights, that is final. There's no improving that. If governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, meaning government operates only because the people consent, if that's true, notice he's quoting the Declaration of Independence here, that is final. Okay, we've arrived at the pinnacle. That's what he's saying. If what Jefferson wrote, the founders adopted, and America was built upon, if these truths are true, that all men are created equal, that they are given by their creator inalienable rights, and the government only operates and exists because of the consent of the people that are being governed, then those things are final. He goes on, no advance, no progress can be made beyond those propositions. If anyone wishes to deny their truth or their soundness, the only direction that he can proceed historically is not forward. So think of it as a hill. And we're learning, and Jefferson takes all these things that we've learned and all the philosophers, John Locke and others, and he takes them, Thomas Hobbes, social contract, and John Locke, natural rights, and he takes all of them, takes the best of the best, and he compiles them in these statements in the Declaration of Independence. Think of that as the pinnacle of the hill. Now, if you move forward from the pinnacle of the hill, you're going to be going back down the hill. And that's what Coolidge is saying. The only direction a person can proceed historically is not forward, but backward toward the time when there was no equality, there were no rights of the individual, and there was no rule of the people. Those who wish to proceed in that direction cannot lay claim to progress. You may call yourself progressive by pushing us off the hill, the top of the hill. You say, well, we're moving, but what you're doing is you're dragging us down to where we were before. I like the hill analogy because you can still claim to be moving forward. If you put a car in reverse, then you can't claim to be moving forward. But if you are at the pinnacle, the top of the hill, these things are true, and then you try to push it further, you're actually regressing and taking us back down the hill. That's what Coolidge is getting after. You don't lay claim to progress. You are reactionary, he says. Their ideas are not more modern, but more ancient than those of the Revolutionary Fathers. That quote is dynamite. That quote is just, as the kids would say today, fire. Calvin Coolidge, most underrated president in American history. You can let me know what you think. Peter@peterheck.com is the email address, peter@peterheck.com. Now, I know this is the Dashboard Jesus podcast. And so because of that, we typically try to edify and encourage those of you that are part of this with spiritual thoughts. And there were a number of things that I wanted to bring up, but whenever somebody in our community throws something at me that I think is thought-provoking, I wanted to share it. And let's be honest, if we're being honest, all of those truths that we're talking about, that all men are created equal, that we have inalienable rights, and that governments exist because we create them to protect our rights, all of those are grounded in scriptural truth. The idea that all men are created equal, that's a biblical truth. That we possess our inalienable rights. Why? Because we were endowed, those things were given to us by our Creator. So, in essence, even though this wasn't explicitly religious or faith-filled, these are godly principles at play. Do I want to say godly? These are truths. These are truths rooted in the authority of God's word. We could say that, and not have any fear of contradiction there. So maybe not as explicitly Christian and religious as we typically have on the old Dashboard Jesus podcast. Maybe a throwback to what we had done before. But I thought it was a great question, and hopefully you benefited from it some way. If nothing else, now you've got some anecdotes that you can share the story of Coolidge at the table with your friends, and you can impress them. Or whenever presidents come up and everybody's like quoting the one, say, well, yeah, but nobody among us, where's the talk of Calvin Coolidge? Where's the talk of James K. Polk? Or what about William McKinley and his pro-business, pro-growth stuff? You're going to impress some people. Why? Because you're tuned into Dashboard Jesus, that's why. Have a great one. I'll be back tomorrow in your inbox with a From the Dashboard commentary, and I look forward to it very much. See you soon.